Welcome back everyone to the Interact Post. Today, Article 13 will include us going over and discussing leaks related to Genshin. Specifically today, we're looking at Chiori kit speculations and future banners. Once again, we do want to say that all of the info we have found you can find yourself. We are not beta testers and have no inside information whatsoever. We will be using various different resources that everyone does have access to. Did you lose a recent 50-50 and not have enough primos to keep going after that 5-star? When you looked at the Genesis Crystal shop to feed the addiction even more, did you feel a little bit guilty? We all know that gacha games tend to revolve around spending money, and that can kind of be a turnoff when looking at some of the prices. But thankfully, there is a better alternative with Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a platform that takes games' prices and drops them for you. They provide cheaper recharges for all types of games, including Genshin Impact. Now, you might be wondering like we were, wait, is it safe to use? Lots of people have had positive experiences. We personally have used Loot Bar to top up Genesis Crystals on our own accounts and have been very satisfied with the results. Because of this, your mind can rest at ease since it does not go against Genshin's terms of service. Other content creators have partnered with them in the past and use their product to this day, so hopefully that can bring even more credibility to them. We do want to thank Loot Bar for sponsoring today's video, so are you ready to save money and win those 50-50s? Head over to lootbar.gg to start saving today. Now, onto the video. So the first speculation we do kind of want to go over and look at is actually just looking at Chiori's kit. We're going to be kind of taking multiple different speculations and just kind of cramming them all together. And the first thing that we're looking at is her burst. It looks like it's going to be inflicting an AoE geo damage hit, and then there will be certain buffs that active characters on the field will be getting when this burst is used. There might be some sort of buff that comes along with this. You'll be getting some sort of like scissor symbol that will display when the buff is active, and you'll get some sort of stacks with this and creating more scissors. And I guess that'll be a little bit more, figured out as soon as we get a lot more closer to 4.5 actually dropping when we believe Chiori is going to be coming. And it seems like also this buff is going to help normal attack damage getting a big buff as well. And then looking at some other things, some constellations, she might get a certain geo infusion at a certain constellation. We're not really sure which one, but I don't know, just some of the different talents that she has as well. It seems that she's more of a sub DPS type thing. So Rift, what are you kind of thinking and looking at like this Q or her burst basically, and then this buff?
Yeah, well, basically, summing it up all pretty well. We did actually talk about a lot of Chiori's kit in one of our previous videos. You can find that. I'll have a link at the top of the video as well. But looking at her burst, you stated that it inflicts this AoE geo damage as you use it, and then it also buffs the characters as the duration goes on. So what I'm kind of envisioning with this is something similar to maybe Yunjin. A lot of people have also been talking about how Chiori could be referenced with Albedo even, just being similar as an off-field geo support. I like to bring up Yunjin here, though, because we know with the buff, looking at the buff, it states that it's going to be buffing normal attacks, perhaps. And like you were saying, Vixen, we'll know more as, 4.5 gets closer. But it, once again, makes me think of Yunjin, because we know Yunjin buffs normal attacks damage. And so I'm kind of seeing Chiori as maybe a 5-star version of Yunjin in this sense, because not only she's going to be buffing normal attacks, and we'll figure out more how she buffs normal attacks and how specifically, whether it's all damage like Yunjin with normal attacks or if it's just geo specific. I'm really hoping it's all damage, because if they limit it to just geo damage, it's just very limiting and makes her more niche, and it's almost like Yunjin would be better in that sense, and she's a 4-star, so why would they do that? But I feel like she's going to be buffing these normal attacks like Yunjin, but on top of it, she's going to be dealing off-field damage. We know she's got that AoE geo damage hit at the beginning, and Yunjin doesn't really have, in her personal kit, she doesn't have a lot of off-field personal damage. So maybe it's, creating someone like Yunjin with Chiori. Maybe the buffs will be even bigger, just because we're talking, moving from a 4-star to a 5-star. So maybe just the buffs will be intrinsically higher and just better, but also on top of that, adding some personal damage in the kit to be happening while off field. This will also help with some crystallizations, perhaps with the off-field geo damage. So this could possibly be a good support for characters like Navia, who rely on crystallize, just giving that geo resonance. Maybe if it's just Navia and Chiori, this allows you to have that geo resonance while using some, those other 2 slots don't have to be necessarily geo. We'll figure out more as time goes on. And this will allow you to use other more offensive options in the flex slots, like Yelan perhaps as good options, maybe even Bennett. There's a lot of things you can do, but I'm excited to see just how more, specifically Chiori can buff normal attacks, and just to see how well she can actually deal with her personal damage. And then you mentioned with her Constellation, she may possibly get a Geo Infusion, and my first thought is probably something like having to do with her C6. She's going to stay as a support up until C5, and then maybe be a damage dealer at C6. Kind of like most supports turn into a damage dealer when they get that C6. That makes me think of Kazuha getting his Animo Infusion at C6. Even Lynette doing the same thing. And Xianyun had a lot of talk about, she's a very supportive character, but maybe at C6 she gets, she turns more into her own plunge DPS. So maybe something like that. That's just my initial thought. And then looking at the talents for Chiori, you already brought up, I think that's where a lot of her buffs are going to be coming from, maybe on top of her burst. So she'll use her burst, talking about Chiori, she'll use her burst, you get a buff from that, but then also get a buff perhaps from her first and second passive talents. So it'll be very interesting to see what we get.
Looking at both the passive talents, actually, looking at the first passive talent, it seems that going a little bit more in depth, the scissors are going to be active in that burst that we were talking about. It looks like it's going to buff the entire team's geo damage. I know it kind of talks about just a buff in general to team damage, but it seems that, at least with more leaks coming out, it'll be more focused on specifically just geo damage. So helping characters like Navia, helping characters like Ito and Noelle. I think both these characters, all three of these characters, are pretty good for the sub DPS role that maybe Chiori is going to be coming in for. And then her second passive talent is going to be helping basically a little bit more of those coordinated attacks with her scissors. We're not sure exactly how yet, but it seems like that's going to be kind of a little bit more on that front. Looking at the next bit, it seems that she's going to be focused more on attack and defense multiplication, on that scaling type idea, while she's going to be ascending into crit rate, and then her weapon will probably go into crit damage. So that's actually kind of really nice to see that she's going to be a sub DPS that is focused on doing a lot of damage, and also making sure that she has a little bit of supportability, maybe helping with geo damage. So she's really just focusing and making sure that she really kind of only fits on geo teams. Now, once again, we thought the same thing or similar ideas with Farina, how it would be a little bit harder for her to be extremely focused on other teams outside of Fontaine characters, but that got thrown right out the window as soon as we saw characters like Noelle come up, and how she kind of drains her own character's HP and makes her own Farina stacks, basically. So maybe as time will come, Chiori can do the same thing and be a little bit more different than just a geo support. But looking beyond Chiori, the idea across looking at, I guess, the Genshin Impact banners from 4.5 all the way to Natlan, basically. We already know 4.5, we obviously talked about this entire time for being Chiori's release, and possibly with an Albedo run, which is kind of interesting considering she might be a quote-unquote almost better version of Albedo, basically. But it seems like Dahlia might make an appearance, which I believe we talked about in the last video, the video before for the Interact post, about Dahlia making a possible release with some sort of Mondstadt festival that could come up and pop up, and even something that's kind of interesting is looking at something with Dainsleif in Fontaine era right now. I think this makes a little bit more sense maybe in the 4.6 era with the Arlecchino stuff, but having Dainsleif pop up in 4.5 can have us focus in 4.6 more on Arlecchino. So actually talking about 4.6 Rift, what do we see coming up in 4.6?
Well, like you just mentioned, that's most likely when we are getting Arlecchino's release. We'll have that weekly boss with info on more of Natlan and even the Fatui, just because, obviously Arlecchino is part of the Fatui. So I'm very excited personally for the story we're going to get out of that. Maybe even like Arlecchino's story quest. It is definitely very exciting because I just know we haven't heard at least too much about Arlecchino's personal influence with the actual main story. Yes, she appeared in the main story quite a bit, but like I was wanting more. I don't know about you, but like I was just like, man, I feel like there's something missing, and maybe it's just that she's not playable yet and we don't have her story quest. I don't know, but like I'm excited for that, so that is something to look forward to. I'm also personally very excited about the Dainsleif quest. I always really like the interlude quests. They're just very interesting, and we usually get more information on meeting the other twin, and I'm just very excited for it. But also another thing in 4.6 is the talk about Ivka, the mummy girl. And that's another character I'm very excited about just because she is a 4-star. So we are possibly going to get her in 4.6. Another talk that's kind of recently surfaced is a possible Nilou rerun. because there will probably be somewhat of a Sumeru festival in 4.6, and this also kind of justifies the whole idea of Ivka coming out because she is also a Sumeru character. So who knows, some Sumeru festival going on. I'm kind of excited for, because I personally like Sumeru. It's one of my favorite regions. And then also getting a Fontaine map expansion in the northwest of Mont Asus. I feel like this map expansion is going to deal specifically with the new weekly boss, whether that's Arlecchino or something different. But I think that's definitely going to be tied to that and kind of the main story opening in 4.6. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. But going right over into 4.7, it looks like we're going to be getting the Cloron and Sijuan release. Still not necessarily 110% sure if Sijuan's going to be a 4-star or 5-star yet. It is quite a bit of ways away, so we have some time to kind of figure that out. And I know I won't go too deep into that because we already did go over an Interact post on that. But looking a little bit deeper into 4.7, looking at kind of a little bit more focus on maybe getting some Farina and some Rumeria stuff, and maybe even some Celestia things that kind of will pop up a little bit more during the 4.7 era, getting closer and closer to Natlan. And this might actually be the point in time why it's going to be focused on Farina, is we're going to be possibly getting a Farina rerun with the second part of her story quest. It seems as time goes on, we're getting more and more 5-star, Archons, obviously, that are going to be getting the idea of, getting their second part of their story quest that's going to be coming out in usually the later part of their specific region. So that'll be kind of cool to see what's going to be happening in 4.7. 4.8 is going to be kind of focused a little bit more on like Emily or Amelia, which one that one's going to be. Getting some good Pyro character, maybe right before 5. The entire time during Natlan, and kind of looking at that, maybe focusing and forcing some characters to maybe want to pull a Pyro character before you go into the Pyro region. And possible sightings and looking at a lot of stuff from the Hexen Circle, considering Emily is from the Hexen Circle, maybe getting some stuff with Alice with the Golden Archipelago Island, because I believe 4.8 is going to be more focused in the summertime, which is normally when we get the Golden Archipelago type stuff. That type of idea is going to be kind of going around, so looking at a lot of the Hexen Circle thing, I think is going to be the biggest thing that's going to be happening in 4.8, which is great because then that focuses and follows right into Natlan. And speaking of Natlan, there is so much stuff coming here, Riff. So what do you really see coming here?
There, yeah, like you said, a lot, and it's a lot of speculation as well, just because it's still pretty far out. But some characters we hear about is Capitano, Columbina, and then there's the whole talk about the Archon herself being like, there's 2 versions of her, and stuff like that. We did mention that in a previous video before. People have also talked about a reincarnated version of Senora. Now, I don't know your thoughts on this, Vixen, but I don't know. That would be pretty cool in my opinion. I'm not a lore buff in this game, so I wouldn't know too much about can this actually happen or can this not actually happen. But once again, I would be pretty cool. So what are your thoughts, Vixen, on the idea of a reincarnated Senora?
Well, the idea of it, I would be extremely happy, and I think if people did it, I don't think you understand how much money people would pour right back into Genshin. I even think I know some people that actually got, almost took a break because they were mad that she died. She got some Pyrrha treatment, if you know what I'm talking about. If you watched Ruby, you would understand my little thing there, but my analogy. But, the Archon thing is kind of weird, looking at more Archons that are, split between 2 different characters. Again, that's already happened multiple times. They might as well beat it to death, I guess. But maybe another character I know that a lot of people are talking to that is kind of interesting is Shibalanche, and I hope that I said that correctly, but it's a very difficult name just in general. But it's a playable tall male character, and his attack has something new and interesting. The Archon's going to have the ability to change the terrain around her, maybe some idea that's really, really cool. I think that personally is extremely cool. I can't wait to see what she does there. Looking at all the different sovereigns and disciples, the whole idea between Natlan is the chief's idea, where it's a bunch of different tribes, how maybe that affects, the Archon herself, and how that affects maybe the wars that are maybe possibly going on in Natlan. That's kind of the whole idea with them, is that constant war, and that, I think that this is just going to be a great time. I'm extremely excited for Natlan. Natlan and Snezhnaya have been what I've been looking forward to since I started the game. Both of those areas looked extremely cool, so I'm extremely excited for these characters, but we do have to wait for Fontaine to end. A lot of cool stuff coming out from them there, as well as Harbingers and everything. honestly, there's so much to look forward to, especially with everything that's going to be coming out. And I think that's really all we have for today. Rift, if you have anything else that you want to bring before we head out.
Not much. Just I'm also very excited, and it's gonna be a blast. I know Fontaine's story was such a joyride, and it just makes me so excited to see what Hoyoverse has in store for us with Natlan.
Right, exactly. I'm extremely excited, and we can't wait. But besides that, that's everything we have for this week, so we'll see you guys in the next one.